and gentlemen, on the Pan-African Daily TV on this special and exclusive edition, live with Professor Professor James Small. I don't know why I call PLO because at least yesterday we were supposed to have him. Anyway, today is a special and an exclusive edition with Professor James Small on a particular topic that we've all been thinking about, culture and political development in the context
starting this show
in the context of Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So I want to start by welcoming all of you that are joining the stream. And please, if you're joining for the first time, make sure you click the link and share and invite one another. I hope all of you are doing well out there on the continent and in the diaspora. So yes, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is the topic that we've been digesting on. We've been having a couple of guests here. Yesterday we had Ambassador William Wallace, and we've been talking about political issues and about the need for us to start implementation as soon as possible. Nevertheless, there are Africans or questions or critics of this particular agreement that are still saying that there are a lot of things that have not been considered before moving into this agreement. And we all know that as Africans, sometimes we ask ourselves, are we really ready? Do we even know what it entails for us African people? What are the values that we hold so high in esteem when we negotiate this kind of international and global agreements? Did the parties involved or the African Union that set up this project with its partners consider the cultural aspects of, to be put in place? But are Africans themselves culturally ready for this huge task that is ahead of us? I'm so happy that if we have Professor James Small on the show, we can relax and we can trust that the conversation is really going to go smoothly. Now, one thing we're going to be doing tonight is conversing. And as you know, our conversations are smooth and easy. So you can ask questions by dropping your direct questions in the chat box, as well as you can call when the lines are open. Yes. So I'm very interested in this topic to have this conversation because I know I will be learning a lot. Exactly, you watching us today, if you haven't considered every little and nitty-gritty of this agreement, culture and political development could be another one milestone that we have to rethink and grab the opportunity. So welcome, Professor, to this edition.
Thank you, Sister Susan. And the one thing we're going to do is try to do, Malcolm X always taught us, he said, make it plain. Keep it simple. There's nothing really complex about what people need to begin to know. The complexities are going to be in who will reap the profits from this, you see. Mm-hmm. Because many of the products that we will be moving across borders, some will be indeed manufactured in Africa, but my fear is that most would be manufactured in other parts of the world and then brought to Africa to be sold to their people. Mm-hmm. So this is going to open the door for many Western corporations, even the Walmarts and the others of America, to be able to base in Africa, but to sell their product continental-wide without any tariffs on them. Mm-hmm. And that can be an advantage or a disadvantage. I don't know the details on labor or the details on the kind of new job creations or the details on the kind of corporations that will be able to come in mm-hmm. from other countries with their developed technology and indeed produce the product on the continent of Africa. But now they have the entire African market unrestrained for that product. We know this will remove the criminalization of many of our local products because someone going from Ivory Coast to Ghana, if they can't pay the tariffs, will have to find other means. And we know in Ghana and Ivory Coast and Togo, every 20 miles, there's a police barricade checking for contrabands. And the contraband is usually a product from the other country that the poorest of our people are trying to bring to the marketplace in another country. So this will decriminalize that process and allow many of our local people to move their products across borders without any tariffs. I'm sure there still have to be regulations and declarations, those legal things that happen when you cross any borders. But at least the tariff removal will make that easy for our people. And I think the concept will lead towards the abolition of borders completely, when we'll be able to cross these borders without visas, or without special permissions as such. So let's hope that's the pathway that they're taking. But right now, we would like to see the producers of a product in Nigeria not be restricted to sell that product in the other 53 nation states. Or the person making the product in Zimbabwe not being restricted to sell that product in the other 53 states. That's going to be a big advantage. And this will probably help a lot in precipitating the building of new highways and freeways, intercontinental, intercountry, because that's one of the big problems, the roads, the bridges, and maybe the capital that this will bring into play will allow for these arteries to be built or improve to facilitate making trade real between the different countries. But a great part of this depends on the African corporations and institutions to have access to capital in order to develop the manufacturing sector in the country that they live in. And we haven't been able to do that because these tariff restrictions have limited our marketplace. Let's hope by expanding the marketplace for everyone on the continent, this will begin to produce the kind of capital that would allow us to really do industrial development and producing products that will create jobs for our people. But along with this also has to come the African governments, have to stop importing Chinese nationals by the tens of thousands who are doing nothing but becoming laborers, doing jobs that our people could be doing. So if the Chinese have a contract and they're coming in to build a bridge, we don't need Chinese laborers to do that. We have African laborers to do that.
Absolutely.
Now, what's happening, you're bringing in the Chinese laborers, okay? And they're using both our culture through the marrying of our women or having babies with our women to attach themselves to the ownership of our lands, which is a very dangerous thing given the way land is managed in Africa, and that the land belongs to the village, it belongs to the community, and is leased out for perpetuity if you live there or for a certain amount of years. So we are interrupting when we import foreign nationals as labor as a part of the contract with these multinational nations like China, America, and Britain, in order for them to bring us this contract and give us a loan, which they end up servicing. The loan don't even go into our banks. So there's certain things that has to change. As these larger corporations come into our country, and we have to take out loans to build roads and bridges, then let that capital, when the loan is granted in the Western banks, be placed in African banks so that it can gain interest and we can use it. Right now, the way it works, if an African nation is given a loan from America for $500 million, the money stays in American banks.
Correct.
And not in African banks. So we're not getting any profit from that money that we have to pay all this interest on to give back. Also, when they bring in equipment and vehicles, it ends up the strategic one belonging to the group that bring them in. And this even goes down to the not-for-profit. They'll get this money to come and do a service in our country, and they'll bring their Jeep vehicles and other vehicles, but it belongs to them and not to the institution in our country. So there's a lot of negotiation that has to take place on what the relationship is really going to be with the nations who are going to come with the capital, supposedly to help develop African industry, because you can't do trade if you don't have the commodity. And you can't get the commodity if you don't have the capital to build the infrastructure to produce it.
Correct.
Even if agricultural, you know, you have to have trucks to move it. You have to have machinery in the harvesting process. You have to have fertilizers. You have to have storage facilities, et cetera, et cetera. In most of our situations, we don't have these things. So our market has been very local, so we didn't really need these things. So if our markets are going to come now intercontinental, then we have to raise our level of production on all levels. Where's that capital going to come from? Is there a development bank in Africa that will guarantee the capital so people can make the loans to upgrade their businesses, to increase their production possibilities, to add to their inventory the transportation instruments they need to move from one country to the other safely and in a sanitary kind of manner? Those are the kind of detailed things I haven't seen, but I'm sure it's there. I'm hoping it's there. But I think at the end of the day, this is a very good move. We can't keep waiting for the miracle.
Correct.
The complete miracle. We have to take the steps towards our miracle. And I think this is a good step by the African Union, but it can't just be left on the African Union. The people themselves must make certain demands on what they want from this. The different labor unions in Africa must speak up. The different agricultural unions in Africa must speak up. The different village collectives that's producing cocoa and a certain commodity must speak up. Right now, most of the cocoa that's produced in Africa, especially in Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, is being sent out of the country as raw. And none of the strategic manufacturing aspect of developing from the cocoa bean to the chocolate bar is happening in Africa. So part of the arrangement has to be like, okay, we have to sit down and renegotiate a lot of these colonial contracts that we were forced into under duress around our natural resources, so that some aspect of its manufacturing process is done here on the continent itself. And that Africans can buy into these corporations and even be the subcontractors for much of this corporate work. Then we have something to trade intercontinentally. Otherwise, the only people that's going to really profit from the intercontinental trade are the non-African corporations, Chinese and Europeans and white South Africans on the continent. They will be the one profiting. And the masses of our people who are producing almost at a minimal level don't even have the capital to produce the commodity necessary to make the kind of profit that would make this worthwhile. Now, I hope that's simple enough, because that's basically what we're looking at. Some will say, oh, you're making it too simple. No, it's like food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security. Okay. Every family, every individual on the continent of Africa is doing what they're doing in terms of making a living to provide food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security. That's why they want to make capital. That's why they want to make money. Okay. And hopefully get at a level where you can reinvest that capital and produce other industry that would employ more of your people and also expand the development of sub-industries to the larger industries. Okay.
Right.
And so if we're going to go there, and that seems to be where they said we want to go, then they have to make sure that the external competition from the Western and Asian world and the Indian world is not controlling the economic flow of this trade.
Mm-hmm.
Because right now, except for a few nations, there's very few African industry that's going to be able to profit from this because of the lack of capital. Now, we know we have capital, but most of the Africans with that larger capital have that capital in banks in the Western world and the Arab world and the Asian world. Will this facilitate some of that capital being moved back to the continent and in African banks available to be borrowed by African manufacturers and merchants to upgrade their business so that they can take advantage of the intercontinental trade and the removal of tariffs? Those are the big questions that I see. And then when we come to the question of culture, just briefly, all of us have to get away from seeing Africa as being multicultural to the point we can't unite.
Mm-hmm.
And that thing, because we need to get rid of a Western idea of what culture is. Culture is not music. Culture is not dancing. Culture is not art. Okay? Culture is not the design on your clothing. Culture is not the makeup you wear and how you wear it, or your hairstyle. Those are tools of culture.
Mm-hmm.
Culture is the fundamental principles based on communal, collective, cooperative living. It's ethics and moral laws that govern African behavior. All those other things are there to help us learn that and reinforce that.
Mm-hmm.
So we've gotten into a Western mindset where we see the tools of culture as culture, and we don't even see what African culture really is, because if we did, we would abandon all Western religions and all Western philosophy, because we have a continental philosophy. We have a continental sacred science system. We may call it spirituality, but it is a sacred science system. And it is as scientifically authentic as anything the West has ever produced. But in our system, it's tied to our notion of our divinity and our ancestry, which makes it our divine continental culture. And ecology will determine the tools used to teach and interpret. But don't confuse the tools that different ecology demands with the principle it's trying to interpret. Mm-hmm. Because that's fundamentally it's your culture, it's your value system, it's your worldview, and it's based on your ancestors' experience. Mm-hmm. So then we get to the question of knowing our history. Because if you don't know your history, then you don't know your ancestors' experience. Because you think you know history, but you know your enemy's history about you. Let's learn our ancestors' history about ourselves so we can define the role of our enemy in creating the crises we find ourselves in today.
This sounds very interesting because if we look at the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, one would start to ask, why would even the leaders of Africa engage in such an agreement? Isn't it that they would have even started with this aspect of culture? On the continent today, we don't have even the Center for the Science of our call it, like you said, spirituality. We don't have. We have Buddhism. We have churches that are religious churches. We have
a colonized spiritual mind. Our spiritual mind has been colonized by Eastern and Western religions, which is based on their culture and their value system. For instance, if you're a Muslim and you say Muhammad is black, that could cost you your life. because the Arab world and the rest of the Western world have determined Black to be negative.
Mm-hmm.
And all their dictionaries defined it as that. Well, that's not my dictionary. I don't give a damn how they defined it. That's not my definition. I was listening to a scholar from Somalia the other night. And in Somalia, when the Kushite language, which preceded the Egyptian language, was the lingua franca of East Africa, the word Black meant crystal and clear and glowing and clean. So how do we let our enemy define something so significant to our reality, and then we use it across the social spectrum to determine how we view it?
Mm-hmm.
That's what culture is about. Culture is about rearranging your values to fit your historical reality, not rearranging your values to fit your enslavers, your colonizer, and your genocider political reality. That's just one word. I just thought I'd use that one word, okay? Or here you are, a beautiful, a gorgeous, a God-looking African woman. But the white man of Europe and the Asian man think they set the standard for female beauty in the world. And if the African woman don't reduce herself to that standard, she's then not viewed as beautiful. And we are going along with that, spending billions of dollars. I know the African Americans, we spend billions of dollars on European-made makeup, on Asian hair, on horse hair, to create a motif that fits the European concept and idea of beauty. That's not African culture. That's not what determines beauty in an African cultural context as regard the mother of our creation and our nation. So when we talk about culture and governance, a good example would be looking at Kwame Nkrumah. And I love Kwame Nkrumah. But had he taken a path of indigenous, communal, collective, cooperative methodology for developing governance, instead of a Western Marxist, Leninist socialist, he may never have lost the country. And so why don't we understand that the value system, how can you use the value system of the murderer to grow yourself as a non-criminal person? Okay, it's not gonna work. You know, it's not gonna work. It's like the woman who is raped being forced to marry her rapist as a husband and think there's going to be love in that relationship. Ain't gonna work. She'll forever be the victim of the rapist and the slave to that man's values, because you've just validated those values as being authentic and appropriate. And what we have done, thanks to Western religious proselytization, and religion is Western culture, by the way. I mean, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, that's other people's culture, okay? In those religions come the value system of that group. And if that value system marginalize you, minimalize you, make you inferior to them, label things about you as being negative, well, if you're going to accept those value systems, then you have to accept their definition of you, and all of it is bad. Power in a cultural context is defining your reality and have others accept your definition of yourself as if it were their own. And if we're not doing that, then we're accepting someone else's definition of ourselves as if it were our own. And that's part of our problem. You can't say, oh, I could believe this and it's all right. Well, if what you believe disrespects me as a nation, disrespect me as a people, disrespect my ancestors, disrespect my ancestral institutions, disrespect my language, then how can I then be all right with you having that belief standing beside me? No, it is not all right. It can't be. especially when you are allied with all of the money and the military of the enemy of our nation. So culture is one of the things that our politicians, both in Addis and in the 54 capital, need to turn around and pay attention to. You know, how absurd it is for us to have a continent with nearly 1 billion+ people, 54 artificial nation states, most of which shouldn't even be nation states. But so be it, they say they are. But yet we still find that we can only do business and have relationships in the language of our conquerors and our genociders and our enslavers and our colonizers. We have languages. Kiswahili is the most widely spoken language in Africa. Why are we speaking English or French and teaching it in our schools when we could be teaching Kiswahili in all of the schools of the 54 nation, and at least everyone should know that one African language, and that should be the language we communicate in. And if we want to have a trade conversation in English or French, fine, because you got to communicate with everybody. But we need a language system of our own. People say, oh, people are going to big and argue, why can't it be Akan? Why can't it be Zulu? Because one thing about the Kiswahili, it is already the largest language spoken on the continent.
Correct.
Okay? And it's not that difficult a language to learn. I mean, that should be an order of the day. A language that we can speak our thoughts and project our identity and fashion our worldview that comes out of our ancestral development and not that of the enemies. That's just one little thing, but it's a big thing. So when you go to China, you don't trade with them in English. They're speaking Mandarin or Cantonese. And when it comes to business, mostly Mandarin. If you're dealing with the local population, then Cantonese. But that's it. Their language, built around their values, their worldview, their concept of themselves, their concept of their history is rooted in the language. All languages do that. So I've got hear me now, I'm speaking in the murderer's language. I'm speaking in my rapist language. I'm speaking in my colonizer language. I'm speaking in my genocidal language, trying to explain to my people who are listening in the same profane language and trying to make sense of things African. That don't even make sense. Why do we call African? Only thing that we can say is because of our location and the color of our skin. Well, if people all through the Philippines that got skin like us, they don't call themselves African. So we lose that as an identity trait. So because of our location, well, there's millions of whites that live on the continent, born there for generations. They don't call themselves Africans. So what is it that make us an African? If not your culture, your language, and your values, and the worldview that derives from that tell you who you are, where you are, and what your needs are, to build you to be who you want you to be, and not to build you to be what your exploiter wants you to be so he can continue to exploit you. So then we come back to our trade agreement. I think it's necessary. I think it's a good place to be. But I have a good book. I hope you can see it on your camera. You see this book? It's called African Culture and Governance and Development. Okay. And it's written by this beautiful African man, Nana Kwabena Nketiah V. He's the Amanhen of Esukado in the western region of Ghana. It's 800 beautiful pages on the subject. He's also a professor at the University of Cape Coast, Ghana. This book should be a must-read for all African politicians. African Culture and Governance and Development. And I think that would take us one step closer to understanding that you cannot do politics and say you're a people doing a politics in the interest of the people, but those decisions and the fashioning of that polity doesn't involve the culture of that people. Mm-hmm. And there's a second book I want to posit so your viewers can see. Yes. This one is called Civilization or Barbarism. Civilization or Barbarism. It should also be a must-read by Sheikh Anta Diop of Senegal. He's an ancestor now. All of his works is significant. This was his major book, and it should be a must-read. You know, Civilization or Barbarism. And what we're now calling civilization in the world is barbarism and not civilization. We saw a good example of it in America a couple of days ago. You know, what barbarism looks like when you pull the cover off of it. You know? Mm-hmm. So back to our trade agreement. We need this trade agreement. We need the tariffs removed. We need border crossing for our people to do business with one another so they can get to the raw materials they need from another country to develop the industry in their country, et cetera, et cetera. But what we also need is an African cultural vehicle as the primary motive force for developing the economic and the politics, which at the end of the day will have to compete with Europe, Asia, and America. And if you don't have an African culture guiding an African politics and African economics, then at the end of the day, we'll remain the colonized slaves of the Europeans and the Asians to be exploited at their will. And it gets rationalized and justified by their religion, which explain how you open your legs to the world to be abused and give them the bastards they can leave in place to continue abusing you. As harsh as that sounds, everybody knows the reality. And I know sometimes people get angry with me because they think I'm too critically hard. But I'm just trying to tell the truth. Malcolm said, make it plain, make it simple, but make it the truth. Because at my age, I'm thinking only of my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. What kind of institution are we going to leave for them, politically, economically, and culturally? Are we going to leave one where we can continue to be exploited because our mind and our value system is formulated by the religion of our murderers, our rapists, and our genociders? Or are we going to leave one where our minds is formed by the spiritual system, the religious system, and the cultural system of our ancestors who we knew love us and still love us and care about us? That's the bottom line.
It is truth, and it hurts, Professor James Small, honestly, because if we look even at the leadership on the continent, that should have been the basics to start with. Like you said, Kiswahili, it is one of the African Union language for negotiations and techniques, but who? With who? We come out in the diaspora, you're obliged to learn one of the languages. In Germany, you have to learn German to be able to be operative. It is not a choice. It is a must. You go to the Americas, you have to learn English, or to Britain, you have to learn English. Africans in Spain, they speak Spanish, or Portugal and everything. We speak every other language apart from our own unique language that we unite. Shouldn't that have been the main objective of this kind of leadership, to first of all just put one aspect, language, only language, and it began to change.
And language isn't just sound. You know, a language carries, it's a vehicle for the history and the culture of the people. When you don't know your language, and when your language isn't the primary tool you're using to communicate, then you're communicating with the tool of someone else values, someone else principles, someone else meanings, someone else socialization process, which determine your values. And that's why you see, we can look at what is called the so-called Francophone states. And there's always a problem with that group working with the rest of the continent because they feel some bond to France via language. Je suis français. You are not French, crazy. You're an African. Speaking a bastard's language. Je suis français. I am French. No, you're not. So, when are we going to get it, leaders? But one of the problems is the majority of our leaders are trained in the French institution, the British institution, the German institution, the American institution, the Canadian institution. So intellectually, they're not Africans. And in many cases, they're exported back home to manage the plantation for the colonialists. As much as they pretend independence, whatever money they make from the colonialists, or they steal from our people, they take it and put it back in the colonial banks, in the colonial capitals. They send their children abroad to study in the colonial schools. They have their private homes in the colonial nation. They don't build their middle and upper class community in our land. Mm-hmm. They live in the palace we give them for free, or the state house we give them for free, and they'll have a modest bungalow here, but they invest their money in the European capitals to build the class structure that they want to live on. Well, you could do that at home. But culture informs you that way. Culture binds you back to your identity. Mm-hmm. Culture binds you to your ancestry. You know, are we to tell the Zulu people that you're to love the Boers who committed genocide against you for centuries and honor and revere them as the father of your thought construct? We're telling them that, but thank God most Zulus are not listening to that. Are we to tell the people of Zimbabwe that Ian Smith should be honored as the father of your nation, and you spit on Mugabe because he stood against the West in your behalf? Many of our people have fallen for that because their mind is rooted in the culture of Ian Smith and the Europeans. Their mind is not rooted in the culture of the ancestors that Ian Smith and the Europeans slaughtered in building their Rhodesia. So culture is an important element when it comes to governance, because it's about your values, interests, and principle that govern the character that carries out the philosophy and the policy that governs the state. You got that? You understand that?
Perfectly, particularly when you talked about the issue of culture is not clothes. This is so pertinent because, like, you know, now we have some designs or even artifacts on clothes that are made with these designs and speak something. And when an African wears it, you already feel like, or when they want to come like to a festival and they wear it, it's like, this is what makes me an African.
And it doesn't. Because the average Westerner don't even understand the symbols or ideogram that's on the cloth. But the sad thing is most Africans don't understand the ideograms and symbols that's on the cloth.
Correct.
Because many of our cloth use symbols that come out. Let me take one good symbol. The kente cloth of Ghana. Mm-hmm. Everybody loves kente. It's a beautiful cloth. And the way it's woven is still a secret. They have not been able to unravel it, right? Mm-hmm. Every kente cloth that was made when it was in the appropriate construct was made for a particular chief. And it had a particular message. And all of them have particular designs, all right, around the lineage of that stool. And the way they learned to do this, the way the story that one of the Kente chiefs in the Kente village of Ghana taught to me was that one day there was a hunter and he was going through the forest. And when he went through, there was all the spider web in his way. So he tore the spider webs down and he went about his business and he hunted. But when he came back and tried to find his way home again, the spider web was there again. So he then stopped and had a conversation with the spider. Well, how do you build this web so strong? And so from learning from the spider, how he weaves that web that can catch animals and bugs and other things for him, and can even block a human from going through. They learned a method of how to weave the kente cloth in a way that no one has yet been able to duplicate it. So let's go back deep into our history, into our culture, into our mythology, into our folklore, and design the fundamental principles of our humanity to guide our polity, our politics. And until we do that, we will simply be using the politics of the enemy with African labels on them. But nothing will change.
This is deep. I mean, when we look at it, it's very interesting to understand that, because absolutely that's the truth. And from furnitures, from what we wear, from what even the aspect of language that you said. I mean, for the African to speak the dialect or the language that they speak in the community, for him it's already African. But what does it make you speak the language and you're going to worship a white Jesus, for instance? It's two different things. Whether you speak the language and you don't think in that language, it's absolutely another problem, isn't it?
Right. Because even the contradiction is, your God says, you're made in my image. And then I go into church and the symbol has nothing to do with me, image-wise. So then either that's not my God or I'm not one of God's. So now I have to try to conform myself mentally. And then I take even bleaching cream and change my skin genetically, external, to try to become in the image of the God who's in the image of my murderer, my rapist, my robber, my enslaver, my colonizer, my exploiter. Mentally, we must be a friggin' wreck because of that behavior. So maybe I should come and open in South Carolina, one in South Carolina, one in New York, and one in somewhere in Africa, a mental hospital to re-Africanize the African from the post-traumatic colonial damage and the post-slavery, transatlantic slavery damage, so that we can move the mess and see the mirror again, and see who we are when we look in that mirror again. And then we remember who our mother was, our grandmother was, our great-mother was, our great-mother was, our great-father was, our great-father was, before we encountered these very sick people who have us fighting wars in every corner, who have us with all of the wealth in the world in our ground, but our money gets devalued. He has no wealth in his ground, but his money is inflated. Does that make any sense? Does it make any sense? I got gold, I got oil, I got bauxite, I got manganese, I got cobalt, I got coltan, but I'm walking around in dire poverty, can't even find a medical clinic to go to for health. And the man who has none of this, he has to find this hospital, to find this doctor, to find this freeway, to find this restaurant, because I gave him my stuff. Because I am operating in his culture. I'm him in blackface culturally.
Correct.
And it determines the values I use to make the decisions even around the commodity that's coming out of the earth. So culture and governance is a very important thing. I can't even begin to articulate it as my brother, Nana Kwame Nkrumah V, African Culture and Governance and Development. Every politician and every citizen of Africa need to read this book. They need to read this book. It's 800 beautiful pages. And of course, I wrote the foreword for the book for my brother.
Sure. I can only imagine that, Prof. And
I wish I could have gotten him on with me, because he could so articulate this in a way that, me coming from America, using my white man Western way of doing things. And even though I'm trying to articulate things African, I'm quite clear that I'm still a white man trying to be an African man. Okay? And that's an eternal struggle, even though I may be more on the African side of the scale than I am on the white man's mental side of the scale. But I'm clear. I'm just beginning to try. I'm still afraid to speak my African language. Even when I go to Fanti land, I know a good bit of the language, but I'm too afraid that I'd be so judged. So instead of telling someone to go and come, I could say Cobra, you know, and not be, you know, or if I want to say I'll see you tomorrow, I can so easy say, you know, Echina instead of tomorrow. Let me just say Echina, you know, and feel I'm getting there, you know. And a lot of people don't know I speak as much of the language that I do, but I'm trying to give myself more confidence. So when I get back to Ghana in the summer, they're going to hear a Ghanaian man. They're going to hear Nana Kofi and Banza II of the Agogo stool speak the language of his mother and his father. You understand what I'm saying?
It is amazing.
Even I know mentally, when I use and I read some African language and I'm studying and I'm going through the translation, I can feel the mental shift. You see, I can feel the mental shift, you know. So we need, you know, when someone I come into Ghana and I want to say, how are you doing? You know, I could say, it's the same. But instead I go like, how you doing? It doesn't even sound like it's the same, you know.
Yes.
Oh, ask me, I could say, oh yeah. It just feels better saying, instead of saying, oh, I'm fine, to say, oh yeah, you know. And to hear somebody and to ask them the same and have them say, Miss oh yeah. Yeah, let people know. I do speak some of the language, so you'd be surprised. Be careful what you say around me, because I do understand. But the point is, and I'm now trying, I have a course in Swahili, which I'm practicing on my computer. But the point is that culture is not just the clothing. That's part of culture. That's the tool of culture. The hairstyle, that's a tool of culture. The carvings of our historical figures, those are tools of culture. Culture is the ideas that all these things are trying to convey. It is the philosophy and the worldview and value system that all of these symbols are trying to convey. So when the world sees me, they don't see a pretty color cloth. They see a set of values, principles, and concepts that governs my behavior.
Correct. Absolute. I mean,
I hope I'm making sense, Sister
you
Susan.
make so much sense, Professor. I mean, you make so much sense particularly you talked about you in the Americas. I mean, if you look at the mindset, even us coming from the continent, and we see you, our brothers and sisters in the diaspora, the African Americans, or we call them Black Americans, or the Caribbeans, or the Haitians and the Brazil. You know, this notion of the continental Africans thinking that they're more Africans than their brothers and sisters in the diaspora, it's disturbing. It's disturbing because look at you sitting there and telling these leaders or misleaders on the continent what is absolutely right. They are on the continent, grown up in the continent, or everything. What are all this religious thing doing in our community? Shouldn't we even have started from that? So that disrespect is already too much ignorance that we have. Like, oh, they are Black Americans. And so we are more African.
That's why I've got another book by my beautiful Ghanaian brother and Kwada Obeng. This book is about 500 pages, and he says, we are all Africans. And then he says, exposing the negative influence of the Judeo-Christian Islamic religion on Africans. And this is a wonderful brother. Now, this book, as extraordinary as it is, and as thick as it is, let me show you what he just sent me last week. And I say, Obeng, where do you get the time? The man's 71 years old. Where do you get this time? to talk about African culture and governance. Here's his new book, 1,000 pages.
Wow.
And it's called The Indictment. The Indictment. Okay.
The Indictment.
And he's talking about culture, economics, and human genocide of African people. 1,000 pages. Because he started out, he told me when he was young, he grew up a Jehovah's Witness. And one day he was somewhere and started learning about African indigenous culture. And he said, I'd already given most of my life to these people. And I decided I would give the rest of my life to do the research and teach my people. One man has produced this document. One Ghanaian man. And so we are not, how do you say, lost for information. The information is out here, but it's not taught in our schools in Africa. It's not taught in our Black schools in America. It's not taught in our schools in the Caribbean. We're still teaching colonial and slave education curriculums. And though some of us have fought for Africana studies in our schools for decades, many times we have to fight against other Black people to get this study in our schools for our children.
Mm-hmm.
What if the African curricula, what if there was a continental curricula written by Africans, about Africans, for Africans, based on the authentic history of African people, going back to our oral history and writing and recording those oral histories down. And that's how our children learned. And when we see the rest of the world, we would know our place and know their place. And we would be not trying to find values and trying to find worth by becoming them. But we will know our values. We will know our principles. We will know our worth. And we will adore that. And we will romanticize that. People go, oh, you like to romanticize Africa. Hell yeah. If you love something, you should have a romance with it. Sometimes I get mad. I cuss Africa out. I cuss African peoples out in the Caribbean, America, and the continent because we won't wake up and listen to our ancestors.
Correct.
Because we won't study our history. If I come to Ghana, and Ghana is my favorite place, and I need to learn about spiritual healing, why would I go to an Anglican church? Why not go to Latte and go to the shrine, the Akanadi shrine of Nana Aparabia, and let me learn from her. God bless her soul, she's an ancestor now, but the priest of the Akanadi shrine is still there, teaching. Okay? You understand what I'm saying?
Of course, sure.
You know, how I'm formed. And some physicists have just proven that your thoughts alter your genetic structure itself. Your thoughts alter your genetic structure. So if you're thinking as the European or the Eurasian, then you're going to genetically reconfigure yourself as one of them. And every time the African in you is stimulated to rise up, that foreign in you will be there to slay it in your own mind because of values, interests, and principles that have been ingrained and embedded in you that was formulated for him in order to subdue you. I hope that was plain enough.
That is plain and that is straight talk. And that's why we love you, Professor James Small. And I want to just take a second and greet all those that are watching from all over. I see a lot of people watching from Zimbabwe on the Facebook page, on my Facebook account. Nyesha is watching all the way from there, Nature. We salute you. And Fossa is watching. Prof is watching from Stuttgart. I salute you. Stanley Fongard is watching from the States. And a couple of people are really watching here from my own account. And we have lot of people watching from East Africa and West Africa under the Pialo Lumumba page. And on Pan-African Daily TV, we have more than close to 200 watching here. And also, we have special guests watching us live from Cameroon. I want to salute all you there. Pen Terrence, you're watching me right now, even down from the prisons of Cameroon. This is awesome. to get this kind of connection and to get this kind of information out there, reach us African people. This is our golden age. What we sit here on the Pan African Daily TV, educating ourselves and informing ourselves, is just the process that we cannot even disagree that we need it right now. While the continent is performing on the interest of the West only, we can guarantee that what our leaders should be doing and should start doing is, first of all, put the infrastructures to get the mind of the African belong to the African. Mm-hmm. Until we set that space in our minds and groom us, we would be trading and building the African continental free trade area to serve the interests of the Chinese and European products. So we just like another market space that they want to dump everything that is not needed. And so they select even the quality and they put it in the West, and the junk, they put it to us. Because of course, you can already see in most African countries that Chinese has already put not just its radio stations and police stations and schools. We are also celebrating events, even wearing the Kung Fu structure. How sad.
And let me tell you how sad that is, because I was a martial artist most of my life. You know, I studied Kung Fu. I studied Shotokan. I studied Goju. I studied Jiu-Jitsu. And in all of my studies, the one thing I found, that martial arts that they are lauding in the East, all generated from Africa, coming out of Kemet, Egypt, West Africa, coming out of Sudan, going into India. The development of the Sholan Monastery, which is the genesis of Kung Fu and the martial arts in Asia, was set up by an African man. Mm-hmm. So even that is not theirs. But if you don't know your history, we'll look at our wrestling and we pay it no attention, and we laugh at them as child's play. And then you go into a Greek history book and see the Greeks using the African wrestling form, and we'll think it's some wonderful Greek athletic contribution to civilization. When even Herodotus, the father of their history, say they took it all from Africa. Even Plato, the greatest philosophy, in a book written by, it's called by Plato himself. The book is called Phaedrus. Mm-hmm. But they never give us Phaedrus to study in the university. They always give us the Republic, written by Aristotle about Plato. But mm-hmm. Plato had his own writings, and Phaedrus is probably the largest one, Phaedrus. And mm-hmm. a book written on the history of mathematics by a man named Kujari. The History of Mathematics by Kujari. Chapter 1, second paragraph. He quotes Plato of Greece as saying the Africans have given the world all of its sciences. This is Mr. Plato. They're great philosophy, but all the statues. But do they tell us he said that? He said he didn't use the word African. He used the Greek word for burnt face, black face, Ethiopia. Mm-hmm. He said the Ethiopians have given the world all of its sciences. And he starts with medicine and arithmetic and geometry and astronomy. And then he says, but the greatest science of all that the Africans have given to the world is the science of writing itself. So if you want them to tell you the truth about yourself, you can study the great ones. And they'll tell you the truth about themselves. Or you can go, they say, oh, Homer wrote the first book. Oh, please. Homer? The pyramid text is 30,000 years older than Homer. The Book of the Coming Forth by Dave, which they call the Book of the Dead, is older than that. But let's take Homer and his Odyssey and the Iliad, something I read when I was 15 years old. Because I thought this big, pretty book was worthy of reading. And it was in the library of these white people who I worked for as a butler. I used to be a butler, you know, I carried the trays and served the food. So I know them very well. Mm-hmm. In Homer's Odyssey and Iliad, Homer said the gods of Egypt must return to Ethiopia in every season to renew themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you are now going to the counterfeiter and the counterfeit to renew yourself, African people. You have a plagiarized counterfeit of you, having you now becoming a copy of it in order to define your humanity. We pour libations, but we curse our ancestry. Every memory in my body, every cell in my body, every DNA in my body came from my mother and my father. When they gave birth to me, they gave birth to themselves. Every memory, DNA, atom, proton, neutron in my mommy's body and my daddy's body came from my 4 grandparents, who, when they gave birth to those 2, gave birth to themselves. Do that not make us our ancestors? Are we not eternal? That's African culture, not Christian, not Judaic, not Islamic, not Buddhist. We have a different culture. We have a different knowledge. We have a different understanding of cosmology and ecology, our relationship to it, its relationship to us. And if we're going to build a new world, it should be built on an African foundation, not on a Eurasian foundation. America just showed you last week the greatest democracy in the world is nothing but a joke. You saw last summer with George Floyd, the greatest democracy in the world is nothing but a joke. And you want to imitate that? Our friend, our father, Jean-Jacques Dessalines out of Haiti, he said, freedom or death. And freedom is defined as being bound, shackled to your identity.
Mm-hmm.
Bound, shackled to your identity. Not shackled to another race's identity or another culture's identity. You know,
Absolutely.
let me, you know, when I say I love my woman, let me adore my woman. She can't just be a sex object who has to poison her skin and her face to attract me, who have to take all kind of birth control poison because I can't control myself as a man to keep her healthy. No, let me see my African woman, and I ain't trying to get you women all upset. So, oh, that old boy, he's something else. Let me tell you this. You are the symbol of the divine itself. Goddess is not a big enough word to describe you. In your womb is where I'm formed. And if the God, whatever we call it, is the God that creates, then you're that aspect of God that creates. What does that then make you? How significant then are you? And we treat you like a whore, like a prostitute, like a tramp. And if you don't get white enough for us, we don't want you anymore. And when your skin wrinkle and your breasts hang, we can't love you anymore. Because we don't know what the essence of you is. But our culture will tell us what the essence of you is. And my airway brothers and sisters, the Anos and the Volta region in Togo, you know what I'm talking about because you call it, your concept to express this at the highest level is the Vestal Virgins. And since I'm not at liberty to speak on the Vestal Virgins, even though I've been given an opportunity to know what the concept is, you're talking about the godlike woman, the African woman. And only your culture can define your woman. And for the woman, the same thing with your man. You're looking for us to be a white man for you. And if we're not white enough in our behavior, not white enough in our money making, then you don't want us anymore. Because we got the value of the white man. They say you got to be the devil, but pretend to be God. Say it again, you got to be the devil, but pretend to be God. African culture will tell us a different story about what our relationship should be. African culture will tell us a different story of what love means. And it's not some feeling you can't explain. You know, then I think it's the airway, and I like the airway language a good bit. They have a word, it's called Sogbe Lisa. Sogbe Lisa. The totality of creation is divine, is the divinity. The totality of creation is the divinity. So why do we need somebody else's language with its peripheral, primitive, almost detachedness from the divine, when we have our own way of knowing the divine, both within us, about us, and around us, above us and below us.
When we talk about all the things, we're always going to be talking about the diaspora needs to come to the continent, bring skills, bring money, invest on the continent. No leader.
I don't fully agree with that. Even though you've heard me make a criticism 6 years ago because I was beating up on some kids on 125th Street, I don't believe the diaspora can bring anything to the continent don't have. Okay? Mm-hmm. We have some of the finest universities in the world in Africa. But when we train our kids, they have to leave home to just eat because we do not control the industrial foundation of our own society. Mm-hmm. I think the relationship between the diaspora and those who live on the continent is simply a bonding and an organization around one tribe, one Africa. So our economics, our politics, and our culture can flow worldwide from one of our community to the next.
Correct.
All of us, of course, have something we can learn and something we can learn, but it's a myth to think that the diaspora have all this education we can bring home. We catching hell over here. We spent $1 trillion last year, $1 trillion the year before, $1 trillion the year before. We spent it with the Chinese man, the Arab man, the Jewish man, the white man, the Indian man, and hardly nothing with ourselves. What if we could take a small portion of that trillion and invest it in African nations and African industrial development on the continent? There we have a value. But you can't have that happen unless you have the relationship. And the relationship is built around culture and spirituality, or our sacred science, a knowledge of our history, and an appreciation and love for our ancestry. And then the wealth we've garnered can be shared mutually along our communal, collective, cooperative way of doing things. You know, we just got a Pfizer vaccine. And the key scientist in creating that vaccine is a Nigerian woman. You know, and there was something critical that just happened the other day, and it was a Nigerian scientist that did it. But we don't publish our own stories to ourselves. We don't talk about ourselves. We're giving all of our greatness to this other culture. There's no reason. We don't need a Pfizer vaccine. When this COVID started, all we can hear in America, Africa is going to be decimated. Africa is going to be destroyed. Africa is going to be wiped out. Well, here we are. We're sitting there in Africa. We're not. Now they're looking and go like, what went wrong? Why aren't they as sick as we are? Why aren't they dying like we're dying? But have we asked ourselves the question, why aren't we as sick as they are? Why aren't we dying? Are we taking for granted the things we use to stay well, the thoughts we hold to keep us well, and how to make that the norm and pass it on and not let it just be incidental?
Hmm. Anyways, I mean, listening to this, I mean, I can see Sir Marvin is here with his $1, one Africa, and it's exactly the concept he was talking about. Like, let's just start from the basics. When we start from the basic, money should not even be the problem. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be opening up the lines in 15 minutes. In 15 minutes, to take your calls and to take some questions, because time and Professor James Small being here is just too much that we cannot risk. Yes. So after the break, just a 1 second break, we're going to be back on opening the lines and the questions that you want to address.
The Pan African Daily TV with Dr. Susan Tata. The Africa we want. Unity, consciousness, our culture, our spirituality, our history. One Africa for Africans worldwide. Motherland's calling its diaspora home.
So we're back in the studio and we are opening up the lines. But before we open the line, we would like, I would like Professor James Small to just address a question that we already had been working on and talking. Isn't it possible that we can already start the basic of this Africa Cultural Institute of education where we're giving Africans the possibility even to start setting up this curriculum from these books and these high professors, just to start by saying, let us start somewhere. What do you think?
I think there are a lot of places where this is going on in small ways. I know in the University of Legon in Ghana, they have an Africana Studies and they're teaching. I know African Americans who are teaching there, Africa from the Caribbean who are teaching there. I know in Tanzania, they have a similar development. I know that there are other smaller institutions where Africans from the diaspora, most recent diasporans and the old diasporans like myself, have been collaborating with schools and colleges in different parts of the continent trying to do this.
Mm-hmm.
But what we need is a universal curriculum.
Correct.
That the African Union agrees with the nation state that this is what we're going to teach. And our exams is not going to England or France to be graded by white people. That we are setting the standard of what knowledge is. And this body of knowledge is what must be known by our children in order for them to build the African world that we want to see as our future. That includes, of course, all of the sciences and the mathematics and all of those things. We need the medicine, but even our sense of law, our concept of legalisms. First, take that white wig off of your head and burn that thing. And when you walk into court, walk in wearing an African garment that is the symbol of African notion of justice. How are you going to have the murderers? It's just so insane. Wearing his garments to validate you as being the arbiter for truth, justice, righteousness, and harmony in your society. Don't make no, mentally, it's hurting us. It's injuring us. And so we had laws before we met these people. We have a sense of what is just. And ironically, in most African nations, even though you've got the Western construct at the national level, when you go to the village level, the chief, who's also a priest and a judge adjudicator, is solving problems based on African law. But we marginalize that and peripheralize that.
Yes.
When we should raise that up as the main element of how law is carried out in our nation. So we haven't lost it. We've just marginalized it. And we've made it the minimal instead of the maximum way of how we express and write law, and the philosophy upon which that law gets based, and the humanity upon which that law gets interpreted. And we're using someone else's tools for that. When we have those tools already there, the continent don't have to look anywhere, not even in the diaspora, for anything. The only reason you have to look in the diaspora because those are your babies who had to leave to survive or were carried away into slavery, and they need to reconnect and to heal so we can contribute to one another. But Africa don't need anything from the outside of herself. She has everything, but she needs herself. She doesn't have that fully. She needs herself.
It's a mixture of bitterness. Honestly, I listened to you and you said we need ourselves. And then the question is, what happened to myself? Who stole myself? Who took my brain? Who gave me what? Just bitterness, frustration, anger.
History will erase that mystery. I like that term. Knowing your history will erase the mystery that was just raised in your question.
Yes, so ladies, gentlemen, Africans, Pan-Africans, Black people, melanated, whoever we are, open the lines and make a call. If you have a suggestion or question or anything that you want to contribute, please, you can call +49 1578 211 2379. WhatsApp only, please. In the meantime, while we're waiting for the calls, if there are some, because I think everyone is just enjoying this conversation here. And Prof, you made it a very good proposal that we need to start by just creating a universal curriculum. I've noted that down, and yes. But what if we also a curriculum, a universal curriculum, also entails that we're going to get a curriculum? We could start a universal African Culture Institute. I'm picking up this call, and we would continue the discussion. Oh, wait. Hello? Wait a minute. I can hear you. Hello?
Hello.
Yes. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Doctor, and good evening, Prof.
Good evening.
Yes. Basically, I do not have questions, but I have suggestions.
Go ahead.
I've been listening to Prof since from the beginning, and he states very, very important facts about us Africans. So basically, according to what he said about Africa, to actually have a new concept to the generation and generations to come, I basically think the educational system which we were given by the whites, it is the one that is manipulating our heads. I've seen this through people who I've been talking to for the past years, and the discussions which we normally have on a daily basis, they clearly show that the educational system which we were given by the whites does not give us the Africanism that we need to have. Our education system has to be changed from the colonial system to what we as Africans are. And then secondly, the religion, it also has to be changed. Africans should know their origin, not just following instructions which were given by white men for their own benefit.
Okay.
Just to add on, sorry?
Yes, round up. I'm hearing.
Oh, okay. Thought you were hearing. So again, on the issue of colonialism, we as African, from South Africa to Egypt, from Morocco to Cairo, we still thinking the colonialism way of information. We haven't yet developed our own strategies of how to implement Africa. Africa needs independent minds, not spoon-fed minds. If we can use the very same education which the oppressor gave us, and we get out of that education and use our very own, Africa can be a great nation without the neighboring Chinese, Europeans, and Americans. We don't need those. Africa has got its very own. Everything is completed, but it needs the people who are in it to initiate everything.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you too. Thank you so very much. I think it's just an overall of what Prof has been telling us, but in an African context and coming from the continent of South Africa to us tonight, everything that he's been saying is the same thing that you're saying here. And now, Prof, this is the problem. Those that would implement, and you begin to ask yourself, are these leaders that are working for the people not really smart enough to understand these basics, that the curriculum that we still writing, whether the GCEs and everything that was defined by the Western board? I mean, isn't it just simple? What is difficult that they just cannot understand what you're understanding, or what the basic African understand that is the need of our people?
Well, we have to look at economic as a tool and a power. And we have to let our leaders know that we will organize the youth, the women, the fathers, the family. We will organize ourselves, and we will close your economy down, because we will not spend in it for a month unless you change these policies. Mm-hmm. Because they will say yes, yes to all the things we are saying. But we have to be willing to organize so that we can make clear that we have a power as a people. Mm-hmm. Maybe by ourselves, we're not making a lot of money, but enough of us didn't buy your products this month. That's your margin of profit for the whole year. Mm-hmm. And you will lose tens of millions. So let's have a conversation. If you don't want me to organize an economic boycott of your main Western benefactor's product, which will knock out his year's profit, then you will sit down with this community and help us implement curricular change in our school from kindergarten to the university. Mm-hmm. If you are not willing, if I have to be in my village with no nurse, no doctors, no clinic, yet you still make me pay the tariffs on this product, on that product, you still make me pay tax on this thing and that thing, then here's what I'm going to do. I'm not buying your products. Because if Cuba, who has been acclaimed to have one of the best medical systems in the world for the last 50 years, can show you how you can put a clinic in every village, then and Cuba has no wealth to talk about, but it has an African tenacity that we can't even have on the continent. So we want a clinic in every major village with at least one OR built into the complex, with at least one nurse, and bi-weekly or weekly, a doctor visiting. That's doable for the health of our people, so that we don't die from cutting our hand on a rusted fence, or the child stepping on a broken bottle, or a child getting the flu or cholera, when it's all preventable. See, there's some things we've got to make as a demand on the leadership. That communal, collective, cooperative is an African way of life. And we can demand that if you do not deliver this to us, and we're not willing to wait any longer, we will organize to withdraw capital from your system. And an economic boycott would crash your economy, because it isn't much of an economy anyway. That's just one thing we can do.
Good. Next call. Hello.
The health.
Hello? Yes.
Is that me?
Yes, that's you, ma'am.
Okay, great. Thank you, Susan. Dr. Smalls. I'm calling in from New York also. Not even quite sure which question I want you to answer, but I just kind of frame it like, given that we understand we are confronted with no less than a global genocidal intent by every single non-African power, political structure, be that China or Europe or India or whatever, all of them, Turkey. Not even Africans, like Dr. Clark used to say, we have no friends. So given that, and given that Professor Wallace spoke very well on
Yes.
for Africans early. And given the fact that we have to also do our own damage repair, because they will destroy you and break you down, but they won't fix you. I guess I'd like to hear your conception of how do we start to go forward first or second, or in which ways would you conceptualize it? And there was another part, but it just left my mind. Mm-hmm. So I'll just let you lay out what would be your ideal conception of the path forward, which with so many challenges to tackle, where do we go first?
Okay. We must first accept that there's three critical areas of development that we must be concerned with. Mm-hmm. Economics, politics, and culture. You can't separate them. They're in a systemic relationship to one another. Mm-hmm. And we must find out what aspect of that is the best tool we can use to get what we want. And all of them we must use, because one of the problems with our community, when we elect people to office, then we walk away and leave them to their will. And we do not get involved in taking control of the political apparatus in our communities. Mm-hmm. When it comes to things economic, we do not discriminate with how we spend our money. Mm-hmm. The African Americans spent $1 trillion last year with our enemies. If we spent that money to develop ourselves, there would be no unemployment in our community. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't have to turn to any other business. And we'd have money left over to invest in Africa on a grand scale. So then it becomes fundamental. How do we manage our economics? And how do we aggregate that economics? Because this one got $1 million, this got $1 billion, this got 100,000. What will allow us to aggregate that? And it is culture. Mm-hmm. Culture is at the core of your racial glue, the thing that glues you together racially. It's culture. And culture, again, yes, our music is beautiful, our dancing is beautiful, but if we don't know the message of principles and of philosophy and of worldview and of ideas, what is the message of family, that we believe that binds us together? So when I see you, it's like the Yoruba during the time of slavery, there was no Nigeria, all right? No Nigeria. So Yorubas lived in many, many places in West Africa, but they knew each other from the scarifications. So they would say when they saw each other among other peoples, they say, look at me, you belong to me, I belong to you, because we've created a cultural system that allows us to identify with one another. Mm-hmm. And now we got a word to let us know that we know each other. Africans don't know how to let one another know we know each other. Mm-hmm. Whether Cameroon, South Carolina, from Nigeria, Jamaica, from Brazil or California, we should be able to say, look at me. You belong to me, I belong to you. I don't care what your ignorance is. I don't care how angry you get with me. I belong to you. You belong to me. Mm-hmm. Culture gives you that tenacity. You see, Culture gives you that tenacity, because at the core of your culture is your notion of your divinity, is the notion of your God, is the notion of your ethical moral principles that guides you to be a human being. So when you marry your economic, politics, and culture together, you set it on the foundation of your history. Because if you don't know your history, you're going to continue to be bamboozled by their mystery. And our history is here to learn. There has been just, like take a book. You know, I love having the books, right? The Archons of Ghana by Kofi Ayem. The Archon of Ghana by Kofi Ayem. It is an extraordinary document. Not should every African read it, but every Ghanaian should read this book. Really understand what an Archon is. It's not just a tribe. It's not that we're from the Kumasi area, or we're from Cote d'Ivoire, and we can tell a few little folkloric stories. It's deeper than that. Or take this one. This will make the Christians happy. The Africans who wrote the Bible. The Africans who wrote the Bible will mess up your mind. Okay.
What?
And this is my brother Dakwa. Bansi Dakwa. And yeah, he got a PhD if y'all want to question it. But when you read this, you'll change your mind about the Bible. But coming back to making sure my sister get the question fully answered, where do we start? What I usually suggest to people is to begin to form study groups where you are, and use one of these documents on culture and history that I'm talking about, and begin to study the history of our people.
I'll pick your call.
You know, everyone should be able to know what is the Berlin Conference. When was the Berlin Conference held? What came out of the Berlin Conference? What precipitated the invasion of Africa in 1880s? What resistance did the African put up? Where's our side of the story? Tell me about the fight for Fashada on the Sudan. Tell me about the fight in the Battle of Khartoum under Muhammad Ahmed. Tell me about the fight of Tipitu in the Congo. Tell me of the fight of Bambata in Zululand. Tell me about the fight of Sechiweya. Tell me of the fight of the Queen Mother of the Shona people of Zimbabwe. Do we know that history? And I hope Burna Boy is listening, because he had made a record of mine with a lecture on that subject. For some reason, it didn't come out. And I wish it had it, because this was a good time for that.
Yes.
History will erase the mystery that we are looking for, you see. And so history will tell us we must understand that there's three main things we must control: economics, politics, and culture. So we must control the economic, politics, and culture where we live. Absolute. If you can't do that, you're not even in a process of change. If you're on the continent, then the land and the labor and the resources must stay in your hands, not in the immigrant's hand. The land, the labor, and the resources must stay in the African's hands, 100%. You see? And you must understand that the purpose for all of this is to secure food, clothing, and shelter in abundance for your families. This is basic. People have us flying out in outer space. No, this is about eating. This is about shelter. This is about health. This is about safety. Okay? But you can't control none of that. You can't provide none of that if you don't control the economic, politics, and culture where you live, whether it's New York or Addis Ababa. If you're not in control of the economic, politics, and culture, then you can't provide food, clothing, shelter, and safety. And then you're in turmoil. But to get there, I think it was Zora Neale Hurston. He says, to be there, you've got to go there. To go there, you've got to know there. Back to history. It is history that is a very big missing piece of our freedom movement. a knowledge of self, not a knowledge of the Asian or knowledge of the white man or knowledge of the Indian, knowledge of Christianity. I don't give a darn about none of those. Those are their efforts to humanize themselves. My ancestor had already humanized me. I want to know, what that meant in the Congo when they said, I'm an egg of an egg of the egg of an egg of
So
the egg.
let's him finish speaking. All right. Okay, I'm taking one more last call, and then hello?
Hello.
Yes.
Good evening, and I'm very glad to be on this program. My question is concerning the African Free Trade Area. Firstly, Africa, for me, does not have a good transportation system or a distribution channel, and the capital which will be needed to run such a big project on a large scale in Africa, I think we do not have that. And I'm asking, what are the mechanisms which have been put in place, like to prevent all people like the Chinese from coming into Africa, doing business using the names of Africans? Because I know there are so many loopholes that right now other countries like the Europeans, the Chinese are watching, that they will go out of business if Africa gets to produce its own, to sell back in Africa, and things like that. Like, for instance, let's say the Chinese come in and register a company using an African, but meanwhile, the profit of that company goes back to the Chinese. What are the mechanisms that have been put in place to prevent such things from happening?
Okay.
Yes.
I think, yes.
We spoke about some of that earlier in the program, and I agree with you. I don't see those mechanisms at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the things that the national states need to come together around. What are going to be the policies governing capital? What are going to be the policies licensing foreign corporations to come in and build enterprises in Africa? What is going to be the policies that determine ownership of a company or corporation? Where is the capital coming from to build the infrastructure, the roads and the bridges and the railroad that you're going to need to make this process work in terms of the movement of commerce back and forth? And what is the banking system going to look like? We have a splatter of African banks all over the country. Very few of them are in most countries. We have the European banks, the Barclays and the others. They're all over our continent. And so what banking system is going to be living and eating and chopping off of our monies that we do make? So these are some of the policies that the population, just like you are asking, must ask of your own government. Mm-hmm. Have you put policies in place to protect me from the vulturism mm-hmm. of these larger nations and larger corporations? Have mm-hmm. you put banking policies in place so that the African bank will get the share of this capital being deposited with them and not deposited in foreign banks in Africa? Mm-hmm. So the brother asked all the right questions. We talked about that earlier as we were opening the show. Correct. And I think those are the questions that we have to ask of the African Union and our governments. And we have all kinds of means of doing it. You could do it through email. You could do it on your YouTube and Facebook. We've got mechanisms now to let our governments know what we're thinking that we didn't have 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So let's let the government know these are the issues we have. If you want us to be a participant in this process, then you have to answer these fundamental questions. And the question about banking is essential. The question about corporate ownership is essential. The question of what percentage of an indigenous corporation could be owned by a foreigner is essential. But these are policies that I think need to be put in place that are not yet in place, though some of these policies are in individual countries. I know in Ghana, if you want to go into business, you have to have a 50% partner who is Ghanaian. For many certain businesses, and some other countries have that too. But we have to make sure that these are transparent policies and enforceable policies, and especially the one that comes to the ownership of corporation and the banking of capital. It should be something that said a certain percentage of capital must be deposited in African banks. And that's going to be a fight because the West is over there. They're vultures and they're going to be at the door. The East will be at the door because, like the brother said, if Africa takes care of herself, Africa don't need them. Well, Africa is taking care of herself and them now. We just have to stop taking care of them so we can better take care of ourselves.
Correct. All right, we're going to pick this call from Europe, Netherlands. So we've met the continent, the diaspora, and Europe. Hello.
Hello, this is Matasio. Thanks for accepting my call. I can see you smile on the screen. Can I speak now or not yet?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, good. I'm going to put this one on pause. First of all, thank you very much. Thank you very much for accepting my call. I was worried that I will not be able to say something. First of all, I'd really like to congratulate my brother, James Small. His name is Small, but I think he's got a very big brain. Very big brain, very big brain. First of all, I introduce myself. My sister knows me. My brother James, my name is Matasio. I'm in the area of culture, all these things. And I've just been oiling here in my studio, not knowing where to start. So I know I have very little time. I will just respond to one thing, then I mention what I've been writing down.
Okay.
I want to respond to the fact that diaspora has nothing to offer Africa that Africa doesn't have.
Yes, I said that.
It's very exciting for me to hear that because I've been having very many questions about this big migration, Africa welcoming its diaspora, and everybody going to Africa. Just the way they divided in Berlin and they met the borders and everybody rushed. But this time it is us rushing to Africa. And I am a bit more of afraid or scared of all this excitement because it is, for me, sometimes looks like an illusion. And this illusion, I express it in 3 questions. Is Africa really calling? Is Africa really calling? I ask myself those questions before I listen to my brother James. My second question was like, is Africa really ready for its diaspora? Is it really ready for its diaspora? With all our problems, with all our shit, with all our mixed culture, with all this lifestyle? And then, are the mechanisms really in place? Of course, I know about our queen from Ghana trying her best, Dr. Ghana, Her Excellency, and putting everything, ADDI, all those things, and our vision to have our own media and everything. But is that enough? Because I am worried already we have this culture of dividing ourselves. Already we call each other South Americans, Black Americans, or whatever. So the moment Americans, a whole ship of Americans will land in Mombasa and they take off and they settle in Africa, will we be friends? That I doubt. I don't know. I'm worried about it. But it's just an excitement. So those are the 3 questions I've been asking myself before I listen to you, because we've been talking about investment, culture. I'm not in business. I'm in culture, history, tradition, storytelling, and stuff like that. That's why I said this time, at least somebody's talking in my area. So those are the 3 questions. And the only thing for me reacting to you was like, I was so sudden a few days ago, I saw people who live together in Africa, they went to America, they're in the military. I have seen on my own Facebook page 6 friends for people I know personally, taking the vaccine and telling the world, take the vaccine. 4 of them are in the American military. Very good friends. I want to call them. I want to discuss with them. I don't know where to start. You understand? Because I'm seeing a white nurse injecting a black American military guy. This guy praising it a lot. That gives me the same image of George Floyd being knelt on, honestly spoken. But politically being correct, I cannot dare do that. Maybe here on Pan-African TV, I can dare do that. I can dare ask these questions. I can dare ask myself, am I dreaming or am I seeing? So those are the reactions. I didn't know whether to ask a question. I didn't know whether to contribute. I didn't know whether to do what, but I just wanted to share. And because I really also referring to what you mentioned about politics and democracy and culture, I believe for Africa to develop, we have to throw away the Bible, throw away all those things, throw away democracy. And when I see what has happened in White House, if that happens now in Uganda with our brother, so this democracy is even proving that it is not working for America. And it's the one that we're really struggling so much to deal with in Africa. All those things confuse me. And there are 3 books I've been looking for. The Akan of Ghana. I was in Ghana before when I was filming there. Deadly Voyage. I had the stories. I've been there. So these 2 books, please, my brother, if it's your email, I want to see where I can see them. The Akan of Ghana and the African Rule of the Bible. Because my son is awakening now, and we're not sleeping, we are fighting about, he's telling me Jesus was a politician, and I'm telling him Jesus was a Messiah. And there we are stuck now. Thank you very much. I am boiling. I hope you've gotten some points from what I can say. Thank you.
Well, you raised so many different things. Let me deal with the African American question, because we named ourselves African American. We struggled to get there. But we didn't just name ourselves African Americans. America's a place, is our geopolitical place. Africa is our race. That's not a contradictory statement. African Americans, we are an ethnic nation, just like the Yoruba or the Akan or the Ewe or the Zulu. They're ethnic nations, and yet they're still Africans. So what people have done, when we say African American, we have been living together in North America as African peoples, having a common experience with a common response to a common genocide and a common political attack on us for almost 300 years. We come from almost every ethnic groups in Africa. We probably have more African gene cluster than any community on the continent of Africa. And when we left Africa, there was no Nigeria. So I can't say I'm Nigerian. There was no Ghana. There was no Cameroon. It was just Africa. So it's appropriate for us to call ourselves African Americans. Africa is our race, our culture. America is our geopolitical place. And because we were forced away from home, we fall under the United Nations human rights documents of being refugees. We don't have to ask anybody to come back to Africa. We respect. We have not waged a war against Africans about visa, African governments about visa, but we don't need a visa because we did not leave home voluntarily.
Correct.
And so I remember when I had an issue in Ghana once years ago with a community, and I had to pull my ancestral credentials. And he says, oh, we've been keeping your stool and we've been keeping your skin. I didn't give up my stool. I didn't give up my skin. Somebody took it. So unlike any other diasporan, I have a right of return that no nation can deny. But we have not taken this to the World Court because we want to resolve this as family. It isn't that we are unmindful of it. And if you know who I am, when Malcolm X was assassinated, I'm the imam that took over as imam of the Muslim Mosque Inc. And then I was Al-Hajj Amin Shahid. So I've been in the human rights fight for a long time. We're clear on who we are, at least those of us who articulate our leadership, Of course, the masses are learning how to be clear, but we are clear on who we are. I'm an ethnic African nation, and my ethnic identity is African American. Africa is my race, my culture, my ancestral heritage, and America is my geopolitical location where I live and work and take care of my family. In any nation state, that's the way in modern times identities are done. The right of return, we are one of the few peoples that have a right of return, but no nation under international law can object to our returning. And though others have objected, we've never taken it to an international world court, and I will fight against anyone who tries to do that, because I think as a family we can work that out.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the need is Pan-Africanism.
Mm-hmm.
Wherever the African is in the world, we need to be united politically, economically, and culturally.
Correct.
None of us have more to offer than the other. Africa can get along fine without any of us, but we can't get along without Africa. That's our mother, and we are the children out in the field playing. At the end of the day, we want the right to come back in the house with our mother like they are the children who are there. And so that's what this whole struggle of Pan-Africanism should be about. How do we unite the economics, the politics, and the culture of the African man and woman, whether they're in Central America, South America, the Caribbean, the United States, Canada, Britain, or in Congo? And when we're able to do that and set up our international tribal economic system, our international tribal cultural system, our international tribal political system, then no one would dare to try to practice genocide on us ever again. Because we are in their house, we know their house better than they do. But I shouldn't go there. I always try not to get too political, because these people over here would, they think I'm old and calm now. So from the old days. I think, again, we need this free trade, continental free trade agreement. It's a first step. What we must be clear about is getting the policy that's going to govern the behavior of corporations, especially foreign, that is going to govern the behavior of capital investment, meaning what banking systems are going to be used. Are we going to make the money in Africa and put it in Western banks? Then the money is not really in Africa, even though the Western bank may be in Africa. Are we going to be able to come up with a system where we can build the kind of roadways so that it is safe for the big trucks to move products from place to place? Are we going to rebuild and build the rail system necessary so those in the rural areas can get their product to the marketplaces? Are we going to build the transportation for water so that there are ships and freighters and barges that can move our products from one place to the other place? Mm-hmm. Those are things that I'm sure they're discussing, but these are things we've got to be raising to make sure that these discussions on policies and the implementation of these policies that will govern the free trade area begins to happen in mm-hmm. real time.
Okay.
I hope that was a clear enough response.
Oh yes, everything is just been there. Even as he was asking, we're taking this one from UK, please. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, please.
Hi, I hope you can hear me.
Everyone is hearing you clear and loud.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm really excited about what's going on. I've been following you now for about a few months. And I'm so glad that people are now making all the... Hello?
Yes. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you very much for all you're doing. I've been following you for a few months now.
Okay. All right. Thank you too for calling.
Oh, sorry. Can I continue? Because I think it's been echoing a bit.
Okay.
I think I can hear you better now.
Continue.
I want to talk a little bit about all the things I think that's good that people the right noises. We've a wonderful thing happening with that free trade agreement.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to say that we also need to look into our leadership, because I'm a little bit worried the direction things are going. First of all, I think security is paramount. We've had these kind of things before, and we know that sometimes when these things happen, the people are watching, and when the people watch, anything can happen. And we saw what happened to Rafi when we tried to have that golden that satellite that was going to cut the whole cost of the communication systems in Africa. So I think security is one thing that we need to look at as we move forward. And the leadership as well. I think our leadership, they need to be in sync and on the same frequency, because when one person does one thing and somebody does another, it causes confusion. We had a situation in Zimbabwe where Mugabe decided to make foreign companies pay at least the tax or get a Zimbabwean partner. A lot of companies immediately closed shop and went to other African countries. So if you have those situations again, it kind of defeats the purpose. And again, with all this enthusiasm, I think it's a little bit more, because if we move too slowly, I remember another caller last night, I think said we had that slow approach from the previous type leaders. So maybe we need to speed up and put in the right places, because I can see we've got so many the talents. So if you could put people in the right places and then galvanize what we're doing and try to get this thing rolling and starting results, people are still excited. Right now, I can hardly sit down because I'm sad about what happened. My name's Kumbrai Musimbo. I'm living in the UK right now. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, too. Yes.
Let me respond first to the Zimbabwe.
Prof, hold on. Let's take this last one from Kenya. Maybe he's going to say the same thing, and then you conclude. Okay. Hello?
Hello, my name is Yabombo Mprika from Uganda.
From Uganda. Go ahead.
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you for picking on me. I've been calling for quite a long time.
I know.
You picked. Yeah, so today I thank Professor Small for really giving us this information. I think it's the information we need. So my first point is that for me, I think already for us to say diaspora should come and invest in Africa, we're making a mistake. Why? Because we think because the people in diaspora are in better countries, so they are the only ones who can come and solve our problems, which I think to me is not the case. But then what I would think the diaspora people would do is maybe to return back the skills they have learned from those developed countries, as we term them, and bring back that learning, the teaching methods, and try to teach our kids, because that's the only thing we need. Not everything that comes from the West is bad. We have to copy some skills. We have to copy some. We have to learn from them so that we can see how we can integrate it into our culture. But then that one cannot be possible if we don't have politics. The politics of Africa is really, really doing bad our continent. Why? Because there's nothing almost that can be done without our politics accepting. I'll give you an example. If you try to look at, maybe we are a tech giant company in Africa, we want to extract a rare earth metal to build something. There's no way we're going to do it without the government allowing. So I think the first point we have to fix in Africa is fixing our politics, because it's really, really bad. It's very sick. It needs to be treated. Then my second point, I want to talk about the love. Yeah, I've seen this during my school time, during the time I spent in community and stuff, we don't love ourselves, and that's why you see we have very many people bleaching, men and women. You see somebody doesn't want to maybe give the needy and stuff like that. We don't have self-love, we don't have love for others, and we don't love what we do. I'll give you an example. We have started some company called Ukudemi. It's a technology company in Uganda. We have built these different sites whereby we are giving Africans a platform to write articles and document Africa, because we think part of the problem of Africa is that we have not taken time to document what we have. We try to look at the books that are written by our people. There are very few. So we put up this site called Yuko site for people to create sites and start writing. But you find that even your closest friend doesn't want, they want to go for Blogspot because they think it's more popular than Yuko site. And that's my second point. Then when we go back to the culture, I think we don't need everything from that has been termed as culture. We have to filter so that we can go with the 21st century. I think, for example, most of the people I stay with, my friends, they think our culture means witchcraft and stuff like that. So we have to come back and define everything. Like, I want to agree with Mr. James, Professor James, when he said we have to develop a curriculum. That is the only thing that is going to help us, because they're going to define for us what culture is, what culture should be, and how it can fit into our society, so that we can move Africa. And I think if we fix the problem of politics, leadership of our continent, then we come and fix the problem of education, how we teach and what we teach, who should teach and what they teach, that Africa will grow and we realize our potential. Thank you so much.
Thank you also so much. I know it's almost midnight there in Uganda, and you stayed up to follow up the show and to ask these questions. We appreciate you. Over to you, Professor James, for conclusion. Thank you.
Yes. I'll first respond to this brother because he was the latest. I disagree with his view on the diaspora, because we need to throw that word diaspora out the window. We're Africans.
Yes.
And we may have lived in the West for a couple of 100 years. We didn't lose any more of our African beingness than you, who have come and lived there for 20 years. So you come and live for 20 years and have your child, and he's still a Ugandan and he's still an African. But my children is no longer an African. What happened? Did the white man have an Alexa that he used to say, okay, y'all are now no longer Africans? No, that's where we're making the mistake. The Africans who live in the diaspora, and I think that's the term we should use, the Africans living in the dispersed places, we need to have every kind of relationship possible.
Yes.
Because Pan-Africanism, or we perish. There's a lot we need to learn from the Africans. We need to learn how to be human again from Africa. You know, yes, we have a lot of technical knowledge access and a lot of capital, and we need to find out how to invest that with Africa and not with Israel and not with India and not with China and not with England. So Pan-Africanism is essential. And Uganda happened to be one of my special places. And Uganda needs to look next door to Rwanda and Paul Kagame and that government in Rwanda to see how they're doing in developing that country. I was in Uganda when the plane was shut down and the two president was killed when the genocide was initiated. And I was sitting with Paul Kagame and the fighters. And when they got the radio call and everybody grabbed their AK-47s, I grabbed mine too and jumped in the Jeep with Paul and the others. But he stopped that Jeep a few miles down and made me and Abraham get out, because he said most of them would be dead in 2 weeks. But he lived, and many of his soldiers live. And look at what they've done in Rwanda. Rwanda has taken a very indigenous approach to redeveloping that nation for Rwandan peoples. I understand in Uganda, we've got the problem of Museveni having been there for so long. and we don't see how a transition can take place. And I so fear that if he dies in office, we may end up in a physical conflict and try to determine that transition. So I'm praying that Ugandan can work something out. And I know the question Uganda is dealing with, you have one of the most extraordinary cultures in Africa. You've inherited so much of the ancient civilization. I know it with the Kabaka. I know it with the Ndolo. I know it with the other crowns that you have that make up your kingship. I even see one of the kings wearing the very crown of Egypt itself. But if we don't know what it all means, then it means nothing. You see, because that's culture. And for my brother, because we are short of time, who was talking about Zimbabwe. And when Zimbabwe came up with the rules that you had to share with Zimbabwe, the other people left town, we should have said, good riddance, get the hell out and don't come back. You see, Zimbabwe for the Zimbabweans and for Africans. And that's not why they left. And those who left, their effect on the Zimbabwe economy was negligible. What crashed the Zimbabwe economy was the American and the British illegal sanctions. Illegal sanction, using sanction as a weapon of war, as an economic weapon to stop an African nation from seeking intellectual independence, cultural independence, and economic independence. That's what damaged Zimbabwe. So let's make sure we're clear. Ian Smith still lives there with his family and his grandchildren if he's still alive. They still have most of their land. They still run to their golf course. They're living a good life. You're not questioning that. So let's get it real. That land doesn't belong to any whites. They're lucky we gave them 1 foot. The land should have all been returned to Zimbabweans. And any white who didn't like it, kupetet bulekai, cut their heads, burn their houses. But soft. We need to understand what's happening economically, politically, and culturally. When Zimbabwe said we're going to control the diamond mines, when Zimbabwe said we're going to control the gold mines, you're no longer going to manage it. We will manage it. The West went berserk. So don't put it on a few merchants who left town. Good riddance to them. Because if they cared about Zimbabwe, they would have gone along with that program. Because it makes sense. Yeah, that's all.
I want to see, I think there's somebody who left. We are rounding up this program, and we want to thank Professor James Small for being here. And we've noted everything, but the most basic thing, or the critical thing that he said is, how do we unite our political, economy, and culture of the Africans? You know, in a nutshell, how do we become kings and queens again? That's going to be our next topic with Professor James Small next week, or as soon as it's available. And please, this is 2021, and we really would like to be consequential. What are we talking about? We are very grateful for our scholars that we have here with our experts. Experts means from us to us. Now we have our educators, we have our role models, we have our professors, we have them. So we shouldn't look for knowledge elsewhere. It's already available right where we're sitting. So
Sister Susan, what might be a beautiful thing to do next year, we know we have some of the greatest professors in the world in the different universities around the continent. Begin at least once a month, invite a professor of our history and culture from maybe the University of Uganda, or in Ghana, or Nigeria, or Cameroon, or South Africa, or Congo, so that we can begin to see that my views are not as extraordinary as you may think. This view is held by so many, but we need to just come together in a Pan-African unit, which is what the work should be about. And like you said, we'll take that up in the future. And I haven't been to Zimbabwe, but I will be there soon. But I love Uganda. Of course, everybody know how much I love Ghana and Nigeria. And then I'm going home. I'm going home to my bloodland of Sierra Leone and Cameroon. That's my bloodline.
Your bloodline. Of course, we're Africans, like we say, Pan-Africanism is the key. So born in Cameroon doesn't mean you are not African. Born in Cameroon, I'm African. And so we said we call ourselves a couple of people have been writing me. I said, Susan, what if we just call ourselves Africans? And when we say you're African from where, then I say I'm African from Uganda. So, but our unique, all of us should be Africans. Prof?
Right.
So agreed and concluded. So dear Africans, as I call you, you call me dear Africans, we're gonna have noted down. We get professors on the continent and in the diaspora from top universities to lecture or to have a conversation with us on history and culture. I have noted that that is permanent. We're gonna be having that on a particular day on the week. We would announce that. Coming up, we also would like to have African technique, creative, innovative solutions oriented from Africans in health, in science, in whatever we're talking about. We're also going to have a particular day for that. And we're going to have another day just for business, international business and partnership. We're going to have a particular day for that. We would have the science of African spirituality that is coming up tomorrow with Kojo Bentil, live from Ghana. He will be here for the second time. And we're also going to be talking about what is it that we need to move forward. We need to go back to ancestral path, visit all the things they did, not demonizing it, but bring it to the forefront. Kojo is coming to tell us about a very important project that he already has started here, and we'll be concluding on that tomorrow. Professor James Small, we love you so much. We thank you. We are thankful to our ancestors to have you with us anytime on the show. And we will continue our history and cultural project once every week with the professors, as you are saying. So I want to thank you, Prof, for coming. And I wish you good night and stay safe. One last word for the audience, Prof. What is it that I should be remembering before I see you next week?
And look at me. You belong to me. I belong to you. African peoples forever. One Africa. Just one Africa wherever we are on the globe.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being with us tonight. Bye-bye. We see us very soon next week. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good. So, dear Africans, we are already rounding up this show. I know we took a little bit of time into it, but this was a very important topic and a very important expert here that every African knows. And when we talk about culture, we talk about politics or everything. We're going for our expertise. There's no way that we want to know about who we are. There is no way that we would be connecting if we don't meet on the Pan-African Daily TV every day. So I want to thank all of you for joining in from wherever you are watching. Make it a date to always sign in at the same time. Interesting topics coming up. I want to also thank those who help, the volunteers and Africans worldwide that keep sharing the flyers, be it from our Facebook platforms and be it from other platforms. I want to thank you. I also want to thank you, Africans. I mean, the volunteers that are in the chat groups asking questions, and particularly also those that stay up at night on the continent, or those that are in the diaspora at workplaces or any place where you tune in every day and you make a contribution. That is already the spirit of One Africa that we're talking about. Your calls, your chats, your sharing, your passing information, your questions, and dropping us always a message. That is already the prototype of what we're talking about, connecting ourselves, and we shall build the Africa that we want. So like I said, coming up tomorrow, we're going to have a very, very interesting topic with Kojo Bentil from Ghana, and he's really going to tell us about why we should get not even a step closer, but directly in contact with our ancestral past or with the science of our spirituality coming up tomorrow. So I thank you so very much. We're going to see ourselves tomorrow, same time. Please make sure you click and subscribe if you're here for the first time, or like the show. We love it. That's the spirit of supporting one another. It gives me the impression, oh, what the professor was telling us tonight was incredibly good. So like the show. It is very important for us to take a survey, how many people we've been educating, how many of us are getting liberated, how many of us are getting back our consciousness and putting back our minds into ourselves. It is very relevant that you like the program and you drop your comment about what you think we could better optimize for everyone. So thank you so much and good night, and we see us tomorrow again. Stay safe and healthy. Bye-bye.